on GTChannel with Sam Matani, James McKeon, and Taro Kogi.
Welcome to Podspeed on GTChannel. We have a great guest today. Thanks for joining us. Stephan Papadakis from Papadakis Racing, a legend in the sport compact scene. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I don't remember exactly how and when I first met you. Must have been back in mid or early 2000s through some mutual friends. Maybe you were still import drag racing guy. Anyway, thanks for being on the show.
Yeah, man. Yeah, it had to have been around that time. And, the industry was so big and growing and obviously so diverse. And those of us that have been in the scene for so long, we all came across each other before we ended up hanging out, on a social side. Yeah.
But I also wanted to let all the viewers know that obviously Stephan's been a guest of the No Break podcast, and I'll have a link up on Facebook and YouTube, and you'll put it up again, I guess, when you put up on the respective podcast sites, where they can listen to a whole in-depth podcast about Stephan Papadakis, about how he started in the industry. But you can also obviously focus on some of the things he's been doing much more recently than that, Tara. Does that make sense?
That makes a lot of sense because we've already, we don't want any overlap here.
Yeah.
So let's get into it. So Steph, how are you doing now? Obviously before all this week, the coronavirus affected a lot of Formula Drift and the series that you're involved in. How are you guys doing?
Yeah, we're good. So last year we had, the full Formula Drift series. In parallel, we were developing the new 2020 Supra engine to trying to make 1,000 horsepower. And we profiled that whole build on our YouTube channel. We were successful with that. And then over this past winter, we built one of the new 2020 Supras for Drift for Fredric Aasbo to drive. We've now finished the car, and we also filmed a whole YouTube video of the building of that car. And we've actually taken it for a couple of test drives because our season has been delayed. So in the next week or so, we're going to release some YouTube videos showing the car on track in its finished state. So we've got that, and then we've got our season to look forward to. Right now, we're on a bit of a pause, as a lot of public big events. But Formula Drift is planning to have events later this year, whether hopefully with fans, but if there are some regulations that restrict that, and we can move around to different states depending on where the safest place to have the event is. Mm-hmm. But even if for some reason we're not able to have fans, the plan is to still have an actual several competition events and then have that on the live stream for everybody to watch.
That's great. Yeah. And congrats on the success of your YouTube channel. I mean, it's just going bonkers. I mean, I remember talking to you 2 years ago and you're like, should I do YouTube or not? And then now look at you, you're a YouTube star.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. Like, I've been watching a lot of YouTube the last, 4 or 5 years. And I probably watch at least as much YouTube as I do, broadcast and other types of television, because I don't watch that many fictional or like produced shows anymore. Mm-hmm. And I learned how to do a lot of stuff and realized I get hit up with a lot of questions on how we, build the cars or engines and how certain things work. And it's been fun to, do the filming and to show people what goes on behind the scenes.
Yeah, the Supra stuff that you're doing is super interesting. I mean, all the stuff that you're doing is super interesting. But just going back to the Supra, what do you think of it as a drifting platform?
It's actually quite good. The engine has a lot of potential. And so we're able to get some really good power out of the engine. The chassis itself is quite rigid, which is nice. The engine is relatively far back, so you can have good weight distribution, closer to 51 or even almost 50-50 weight distribution on the car. And there's already quite a bit of aftermarket parts for it. So we used a suspension designed from a company called WiseFab, and they do full upright and suspension links, and it has a different geometry that's specific for drift. So you get a lot of steering angle, 65 plus degrees of steering angle, And because we run the cars lower, it has a drop spindles, so you can have all of the ratios and the roll centers and stuff all adjusted for the ride heights that we run. And they've been really good for kind of feedback back and forth to continue to evolve the kit. But that helped us a lot on the development of the car. We didn't have to totally develop suspension. WiseFab had already had a really good baseline for that.
How was it compared to some of your other builds that you've had to kind of really Frankenstein it into a rear-wheel drive and really, change the geometry of the car?
Yeah. So this, in that aspect, this car was easier because typically the last few cars we built, a Corolla hatchback and a Corolla IM and a Scion TC, these were all cars that were not normally built for drift. So we weren't able to really look at other people's cars for ideas or, buy stuff off the shelf. We had to design and manufacture pretty much everything. But the Supra, again, because we had the suspension was designed by WiseFab and it already comes rear-wheel drive. So we didn't have to do a lot of unibody modifications. Like, so on a front-wheel drive car, when you convert it to rear-wheel drive, you don't have room for that transmission to come through the center of the car and the drive shaft. So we had to do a lot of sheet metal work. Well, the Supra was nice because it already has a big transmission tunnel, and it was minimal work that we had to do. We just had to make a new transmission mount for the different G-Force GSR transmission we use. But the engine mounts are still the factory location. We just made them solid instead of factory soft mounts.
I see. And has Fredric driven the car already?
Yeah. We've drove it a couple of times. Once at Willow Springs to do an initial shakedown, and then a week later, we were out at Irwindale on a private test day. So he drifted the bank and everything. So the car drove really well. He's really happy with it. And then now we have a list of things that we want to continue to improve on it. A little bit with suspension and gearing, and as you get into competition, that list continues to, you mark things off the list that you finish, but then you add things that you can do to make the car more competitive.
Sure. What's the biggest thing you changed to make it more competitive?
A big thing in drift right now is making sure the car is reliable and making sure the car has some good speed. So we never want to have speed at the compromise of angle or having the car easy for the driver to control. But it is important to have the car, some speed in the car, because the real competition in drift is the tandem competition. And if you're chasing somebody, you want to try to get as close as you can, because that's how you get good scores. And you want to have that grip so the driver can get on the throttle and get close and really show that dominance. And so you need some grip and some speed for that. But then when you switch positions and now you're leading, you don't want that chase car to really be that close. So you want to be able to go on the prescribed judge's line and have good angle, but also have some good speed at the same time. So it's harder for that chase car to get close and show their dominance.
Right. I was listening to the smoking tire interview you did a couple months ago. And you talked about the torque band adjustments and drift engines where it's different compared to other types of motorsports. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yep. So traditional power band, so where you have your power along the RPMs. In traditional motorsports, the peak power might come quite close to the red line of the engine. So, from idle, it's going to continue to build power all the way up to, let's say, 8,000 RPM where you shift. So you see a power curve sort of like this where it goes up, right? Well, what we tend to do on the drift cars is we'll move that back a little bit and then have it drop off some power before the rev limiter. So that can either be trying to tune the cams and tune the turbo and everything to have more earlier torque and sacrifice some high RPM, and then also try to extend the rev limiter out a little bit farther as well. And what this does is when the driver is drifting and he's got the tire spinning and he's at, let's say the red line's at 8,000 RPM and he's at 7,500 and he's still wanting to stay floored with the throttle pedal, it won't just go and sit there on the rev limiter, because the power is going to drop off a little bit before the rev limiter. But at the same time, if you go into a part of a track where there's increased grip and it starts pulling the tire speed down and pulling the engine RPM down, you still have some extra power there to keep the tires spinning. If you have a power band like this, as the tires start gripping up and as the RPM starts dropping, you start losing power, and then it can start really bogging down the engine. It makes it harder to drive. You might have to downshift or, clutch in real quick to get the RPMs up to reinitiate the wheels again. So we found like a more robust torque curve that might have drop off at high RPM horsepower seems to be the most competitive and easier for the driver to improvise with.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think a lot of us has followed you, from the drag racing days. Your 9-second, 8-second Civics are legendary, right? And then you go on becoming this most winningest team in Formula Drift. What kind of things did you learn from drifting or from drag racing has leveraged or helped you with your successful second career in drifting?
Sure. Yeah. So when I made the transition from drag to drift, I really wanted to drive, and I did drive for a while. I got a D1 license and Rookie of the Year in I think it was 2005 with Formula Drift, but I really wasn't able to take that next level up to where the real pros were, while at the same time focusing on running the team and building the cars and everything. So I learned that driving the cars in drift is really challenging. You have very seasoned road racing drivers that'll come in and try to drift, and they can get around the track drifting, but to be at the highest levels, they rarely make that transition. So I learned that driving the cars was really challenging. But at the same time, a lot of the stuff we learned with drag racing, with building the cars, I was able to take some of that framework and apply it to the drift. So like with the engines, we were building, 900,000 horsepower 4-cylinder engines. We had a 1,600 horsepower V6 twin turbo engine that we ran. So we were very used to building high horsepower engines and the electronics and the turbochargers and everything that comes together with, that you need to get to come together with an engine package like that. So when I first got into drift, the power levels were, 400 or 500 horsepower. So it's relatively easy for us to make that power and build those engines and the electronics and such. So that previous experience with drag really helped with the engine side. And then we've been building custom cars for drag racing for years. And these cars were custom to where they're full tube chassis and everything is, including the bodies, were bespoke composite carbon bodies and everything. And when we transitioned into drift, it was more really based on unibody cars that were heavily modified. And because we were so used to building these really complicated one-off vehicles, moving to like an upgraded factory car seemed a bit more straightforward for us. So we had good success with building the chassis and building the engines. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, we started working with Tanner Foust in 2006. And he's a natural, excellent driver. And the combination of us, figuring out how to build the cars and then him driving was just a really winning package.
Yeah, I remember those days. So when you were building your drag racing cars with Sean Carlson, right? Was he your?
That's right. Yeah. So I did a bunch of drag racing in the mid '90s and late '90s, just kind of getting stuff done, get the engine built, make it turbocharged in my old Honda Civic, and just getting to the track. And it was a lot of fun. It was really challenging. Learned a lot. And when I started working with the late Sean Carlson, he really helped to step up our game in making the cars also look good, be very clean, get more towards a cutting edge technology just versus like the garage, technology. And, without him, I don't think I would have, I don't think I'd be where we are today. Yeah.
So you were in a 240 and then an S2000, right? Originally, when you first started out.
So I was drag racing up until 2005. In 2004, I said, I want to do something on the side. Let's do something a little bit different. So I built, a Nissan 240SX, an S13, with an SR20, and did a couple of events there, learning how to, get around the track, drifting. And then in 2005, we built a Honda S2000. for drift.
And was that with Sean too, or you did that separately?
That was all on our own. Yeah, I worked with Sean in 2008 until about 2000 for 2 years or so. We shared a shop in 2001, and then after that, we ended up becoming competitors because he was working with Ford, and then later he was working with Dodge with the Mopar stuff, and
with
we
Sam and
yeah. So we competed against each other in drag racing, and then later on we competed against each other in drift as well. So I mean, our working relationship was really only a few years, but the industry and the car builds and what we were learning was at such a high rate at that moment, between 98 and year 2000, that it really set a foundation for everything that we did moving forward.
Yeah. Now, how did you get hooked up with Tanner originally? So
as I was running my 240 in 2004 and a couple of Formula Drift events, and then I did some Formula Drift events in 2005. And also some D1 events in 2005. I just knew Tanner from the track, and he was doing a great job driving, but he was having trouble getting a car that would be able to be reliable, and he was having a lot of reliability issues. So we would kind of talk about different engine setups and some stuff that maybe they could do to make it more reliable, and we just kind of hit it off. Like I really respected him as a driver, and I think he respected us as car builders. And in 2006, when we retired from drag racing and then went to drifting full time, my thought was, okay, I want to drift, I want to build the cars, but I don't think I can go out there and win these events and win championships, which is what as a team we're known to do and want to do. We have fun doing. So why don't I drive the B car, and then we bring somebody in to drive the A car, and that was Tanner Foust. So we ended up with a 2-car team in 2006, and that was with the two of us driving. Yep.
And you won your championship, your first Formula Drift championship with Tanner.
Yep. So in 2006, Tanner got third with us in the championship, won the championship in 2007, and then again in 2008. 2009, we started working with Scion, and we built the rear engine converted Scion TC with the NASCAR V8 engine. Ran that in 2009 and 2010 with Tanner driving. We brought Scion their first Formula Drift win with that car. Yeah. And then at the end of 2010, Tanner retired from drift, and he went full-time rallycross. And then that's when we brought in Fredric Aasbo as a rookie driver in 2011.
How did that make you feel when Tanner said he was going to Global Rallycross?
Yeah, I to be honest with you, I also had wandering eyes looking at the rallycross stuff. Like the car builds are really exciting. All the tracks looked exciting as well. It's very expensive and very complicated vehicles. Yeah. But I liked that kind of build. But you know what? Scion was really committed to drift, and we had a really good run in drift. And I felt that drift was still climbing in popularity, and maybe our work wasn't done there. And starting with Fredric Aasbo in 2011 and building a new car for him in 2011 really reinvigorated us to really kind of double down in drift and say, we don't need to switch series and do something else. I think there's a lot of fun and a lot of exciting competition to still be had in drift. And that was in 2010, and now 10 years later we're still having a lot of fun building these cars, and at the moment there is no rallycross
exactly.
US.
There was a little exodus. I remember back then when like Reese and Samuel, all the top guys started going to GRC, and I was like, are they going to take drifting's place? But hey, Formula Drift is still going strong.
Yeah, and in Tanner and Reese's defense, those guys were originally rally car drivers that went into drift, and they're like, oh, rally car's getting big again, let me get back to my rally car roots. But for me, I went from drag to drift, and rally seemed like a lot of fun, but it wasn't necessarily, I didn't have a soft spot for rally or anything. Although,
So-
don't get me wrong, I think it's really exciting, and I love the cars, and I get a lot of inspiration from some of the rally cross builds, and definitely from the World Rally Championship builds.
Yeah, yeah. So I think I remember this was Fredric's first year with you in Formula Drift. I remember after he got knocked out, I was just, you know, part of the media, just walking around, and I saw him up on the spotter stand with you. And, you know, I don't think he made it into the show, into top 16, but he was up on the spotter stand with you with a note and pen, and he was just like stuck to your hip basically, and, you know, like taking notes and asking questions. And I've never seen a Formula Drift driver do that before up until that point. And when I saw that, I was like, man, this kid's really diligent, and he's gonna, you know, go somewhere. I mean, if he does the, you know, makes the right moves and he keeps his head down and keep on driving forward, I mean, he's gonna go some places.
Yeah,
what did you feel about Fredric?
Yeah, one of the greatest assets that Fredric has is his he's open for criticism, and he's open to listen, and at the same time definitely has his own opinions, and is willing to debate. And I think he's not just a pushover that's, okay, that's what I'm supposed to do, I'm going to go do it. It's, okay, I'm going to absorb that, and then this is what I think, and then he and I will debate it, and then come to something that we think we should try. And if it doesn't work, then maybe one of us was wrong, and we try the other thing. But we're really interested. We really like having that debate. And like what you said, it had a lot to do with, okay, we think that there is, for the viewers at home, you know, drifting is judged. So there is what is perceived to be what you're supposed to do on track to get wins. And there's the reality of how people win rounds with the tandem competition, and even how they get good scores within qualifying. And I've watched pretty much every round of Formula Drift competition, you know, since 2004. So I had a lot of input on that by the time Fredric came on the team. And watching Tanner, you know, just become the winningest driver and all those championships. So as Fredric would go out, he would say, you know, I think I should have won that round. I was like, no, hold on a second here. This is what I think transpired in that round. And so what would happen is, regardless of how, unless he won that event, which in the first few years he didn't win any events.
Yeah.
Whenever he'd go out in competition, he'd come up to the spotting tower, and we would analyze every pair of tandem drift cars, and we would discuss, you know, why somebody who we thought would win that round, and then who actually won the round, and then try to interpret why they won that round and what the judges were thinking. And then when we would go into competition next time, we would try to apply those lessons learned into trying to achieve better results. And he still does that today, where we will record rounds with video, and then he'll watch those. And then he doesn't use me as much anymore, because he understands it at least as good as I do, probably better, because he can drive as well. I can't do what he can do on the track. But yeah, there's a lot of research going on there, and there's a lot of, I hate to use the word strategy, because it's just understanding what the judges want and giving them what they want, right? And at the end of the day, if you're trying to win these competitions, we believe that's the best way forward to do that, not to do it your own way and then complain about it after the round if you don't take a win.
Yeah, I feel like drifting particularly, the drivers' meeting is like 50% of the weekend, right? Because if you don't pay attention to because at the drivers' meeting, which we don't get to see, like the audience doesn't get to see, this is where the judges actually tell you step by step what they want to see on this turn. I want to see this on this turn. I want to see this, right? Really specifically, they give you instructions, right? During these drivers meetings.
Yeah. So in the drivers meeting, it's very comprehensive. So we want to see you on this particular line, outer zone, near this inner clip. You should have maximum angle here. You can have some lower angle here. And and they really break it down on what they want to see. And we don't want to see a compromise in angle for speed here. You need to have maximum angle. And if you're able to put that together, you're going to end up with a 100-point run. Very challenging to do that, and only a few people ever have. But if you're not listening to, if you make a mistake is not the right word. If you're not doing what the judges prescribe in a certain section, you might get deducted, several points for angle, a couple points for line, some more for impact. And you add that up, and all of a sudden you might have an 82-point run and be quite low because you're not understanding. You didn't really understand what the judges wanted. In the judges' defense, they do have that meeting, but then in practice on Friday, before we ever qualify, they're also up in the spotting tower with us. So if we have any questions, or if we want them to watch our drivers run, we say, hey, can you watch Fredric's run right now, his practice run? How would you judge that? And what can we do to improve on that run? And that back and forth happens all the way up until when competition starts. And the judges don't want any secrets. They want you to listen and do what they want you to do.
So they're pretty transparent.
And the reason for that, and the reason why is that everybody is then on the same playing field. If everybody's out there for a free-for-all that can do the most extreme drift, then it turns into a trick challenge, not an actual competition where everybody's on the same rules.
Right. So it's pretty transparent on what the judge A will tell you, and Judge A will tell the other driver that might come and ask a question, right? So
that's right. And you can even overhear, and there aren't secret meetings. So you can't, and you can listen to other conversations that the judge might be having with another spotter about that other driver. And I'll often do that. Just not say anything and just eavesdrop on the conversation. And that's allowed. Some people, they can listen to what I'm asking. And the idea is that if I'm asking a relevant question that relates to the judging, then everybody should know the answer to that.
Yeah. It's that's a tough part about drifting. Same like surfing, for example, because it's subjective, but I think they're trying not to be as subjective as possible by breaking it down, right, into those certain.
And that's the challenge, right? Is taking a judge sport and making it non-subjective
as much as possible.
Yeah. And the Olympics, that's something the Olympics have worked on for 100 years. So
gymnastics, right? Same thing, right? It's like you're not measuring.
And look, even when you talk about half-pipe skateboarding or BMX or snowboard stuff, X Games. I mean, there's tons of competitions that are not just people dancing around, that are judged sports. They even have the word extreme in them. Yeah.
Where do you think, let's take Corona out of the equation for now, but where do you think drifting is heading in general? I mean, they've kind of survived the ups and downs and 2008 recession, and where do you think it's heading?
Well, I do feel that it's still gaining popularity here in the US. We continue to have sold out events, even in new regions. So the series is doing quite well. The live stream continues to build, and then internationally, it continues to build. So in other countries, drifting, the popularity's continuing to grow. And then when you look at the drivers and even us as a team, and you look at our social media exposure and our Instagrams and Facebooks and YouTube channels and stuff like that, they are some of the best in motorsport, behind maybe some of the Formula One drivers and such. But I mean, Formula Drift, I think it's shown itself to be a really good event, and we just keep chugging along and having a lot of fun with it.
What do you feel about, sponsors and partners like, Toyota, coming in with a new Supra and using Formula Drift as a platform to promote a new product? You see that happening more with other OEs?
Yeah, so obviously Scion and then Toyota, Ford is in the space. So there's some Nissan cars. Hyundai has been here in the past. Um, and then you've even seen Kia, like at the SEMA show and some others doing drifting, not in a competition sense, but doing drifting with their some of the new products. And then pretty much so many TV commercials you see on for car companies, the cars are drifting through the commercials. So, I mean, it's something that's exciting to watch. And I think that the OEs see that, when people see their car drifting around, whether it's just on a TV commercial or in competition, like in Formula Drift, that it adds some excitement and some pizzazz to a car. Yeah.
You think the empty stadium events will be attractive enough?
I think so. Our live stream is hugely popular, and with or without fans, that doesn't affect the competition on the track. And I think regardless of whether we have fans or not this year, we're going to have successful events.
Yeah, I actually agree with you on that. I actually agree. Who do you think's some of the new guys to watch in FD now? I mean, you got guys like, like for example, like Adam LZ that has more subscribers and viewers than, the series itself. I mean, you have some of this new blood coming in. Who's someone to watch out for?
Well, I know Daigo Saito, who's a past champion and, globally considered one of the best drift drivers, period.
Yeah.
Was planning to come back into Formula Drift this year, so somebody to watch. I heard maybe a Swedish driver and maybe some other Japanese drivers that I don't know of. But I think Daigo would be one, and then some of maybe the upcoming drivers, like maybe a Dylan Hughes, coming up within the scene as well. And then we've got Ryan Turk, who's going to be in the Toyota Corolla hatchback, the one that Freddie has been driving the last couple of years. So he'll be in a new car this year. That'll be fun to watch.
So is he going to be with your team?
That's right, yeah. So we are handling the Supra for Fredric, the Corolla hatchback for Ryan Turk, and then also the GT86 for Jonathan Castro. So we'll be building 3 cars this year.
Wow. Driver team.
Pardon me?
You're going to be busy.
Yeah, man. We've is busy. We're fine with that. It's we love building cars and we love competing. So we're fine being busy.
Where did you think you got your work ethics from? I mean, I not to bring up. Well, I know you're a hard worker. I mean, you're one of the hardest workers I've seen out there. But I think this was on the Smoking Tire podcast as well. You new guy comes in. What do you tell him to do? I think you said something like watch and learn. And it's obvious that your work ethics are pretty crazy. I mean, even just watching your videos. I mean, someone who can create videos like that on their own is like you're pretty meticulous, right?
Yeah.
Where does that come from?
I'm 43, and I've been racing cars since I was 13 with RC cars. So 30 years of this. But when I was 13 years old, racing little radio controlled off-road cars, I was like, I want to be a professional RC car racer. And believe it or not, at that time in around 1989, 1990, there were a few professional RC car racers here in Southern California because there was a building sport of that RC car racing, and there was off-road tracks and such. So I'm 13 years old, and I would see these older kids that were, 22, 25, and I would learn how to work on my RC car from them. And the pit was laid out, really well. Their little, the table essentially, and all their tools were laid out all, square on the table. And they'd tear the car down each day and clean everything with a little toothbrush and put it all together and make sure everything was all perfect. And that was just how I thought you work on cars. That's just how you do it. So as I started working on my own RC car, that's how I worked on it. And then when I worked on real cars, I I definitely started becoming a little bit less, you know, I didn't have as nice of a garage and as many tools and such, but it really was about finishing the car and getting it out and actually running the car, and not starting a project and not finishing it. It has to be finished at some, you know, within some reasonable amount of time. And as the resources and the money became more available and the projects got bigger, there's still that fundamental, have a plan for the project, have a finish date, meet that finish date, and build upon that. And it's just, that formula has worked well for us.
So if a young kid came to your shop and said they wanted to work for you, what would you tell them?
We have them clean up around the shop first and watch us, because you got to learn how to clean up a mess before you can make one. And you learn how to be safe, and then eventually, you know, we know, hey, come here, hold this for me, or go grab that tool, or then you start learning a bit of the language. And then maybe you have them do a little, you know, it's you know, it's the tradesman sort of going up through the ranks and
the apprenticeship.
Yeah. And I did that too. You know, I did that with RC cars. Like when I was 13 years old, and the older kids, they'd have me with a little Dremel and a little buffing wheel, and they'd make me polish the little dog bones that go, you know, that drive the wheels. Cause they'd want them, instead of the black, they wanted them all polished. So I'm there with the mother's polish and the little Dremel and polishing all their stuff while they were working on other stuff. And it teaches you to become meticulous, and what does it mean when it's finished? You know, how much is done before it's finished. And I think having those kind of smaller projects puts into that builds that foundation that you can use for the big projects that are composed of many little projects, right? So, yeah.
So do you think you take that same approach with your YouTube stuff?
Yeah, with the YouTube stuff, with anything new, it's very overwhelming because it can be so complicated, right? You're like, okay, if I'm going to do a YouTube video, I've got to do something in front of the camera, and then I've got to somehow film it, and then I've got to take that and bring it into the computer and then edit it, and then put it out on YouTube and figure out that whole interface. And so I just kind of break it down. Okay, well, so before I ever did any YouTube videos, I planned on doing a YouTube video, and I started filming it. It was too overwhelming. There was too much going on, and I realized I can't do a 12-minute video. It's too much for me to do. So I started doing 20-second to 1-minute Instagram videos, and just shooting with my phone and then editing it with that editing software. And then later on, I would shoot it with my phone and then use the laptop software. And then I would shoot it with an actual like handheld camera, and then bring it in, use an editing software, and then put it on YouTube. But because they were bite-sized and only, 30 seconds or 60 seconds, if I could spend an hour or two on it, it wasn't an overwhelming amount of time, and actually have it was all really about coming out with a finished product, and then saying, okay, how can I improve on that? And then improving on it for the next one, and then continuing to evolve. Eventually, when I felt like I mastered the 60-second video, I said, okay, I'm ready to do a 7-minute video on YouTube.
Now you're making long form
motion
pictures.
And while I was learning to do all of this, I was watching YouTube videos on how to film, and YouTube videos on how to edit, and YouTube videos on the structure of a video with a beginning and a middle and an end.
Yeah.
And as I'm watching these videos, I'm realizing, oh, that's why I like this creator. That's why I like this this specific video, right? Like, and then was it really interesting is to me was the people that were the best, that I felt were the best at making the YouTube videos, were the ones teaching how to use the camera and how to film certain things, because those are typically individuals, men and women, that were interested in filming, maybe working in Hollywood and building and making film, but they ended up, so they know how to use the camera really well, and they knew how, maybe they took a little bit of film school or something, and they were putting that production value not production value, but that production maybe structure into the videos I was watching.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so I was taking some of those structures and then just applying it to automotive videos.
I see.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to jump in, Tara, for a second. So, Stephan, as we've got your YouTube page up now, which is the one that you've had the most enjoyment making of all these ones that you've put through? Because I will say that from I hear this from my father when I sent him the first video that you did the breakdown of the Supra, the first one, and he was like, well, Jay, I told him, I prefaced it with it being that it's a drifting video. My dad was like, oh, drifting cars. Yeah, I don't like it when they skid. It's not for me. And I was like, James, like, Dad, just watch it. It's not about the drifting. It's about the breaking down of the car. It's incredible how Stephan's able to talk you through the whole thing. And then I sent it to my dad, and my dad put it aside, left it for a day or two, and then I hit him up and said, "Have you watched it?" Yeah, he was like, "No, I'll watch it now." And he came back, he was like, "James, you need to send me all these videos. I want to see how this car finishes." And so each time they come up, I send it to him, and he's like, "James, when's the next one? When's the next one?" And I'm like, it's coming, Dad, it's coming. He's a busy boy. He's got lots on his go here. So with that being the case, which is the one that's been the most enjoyable for you to kind of work
on? The one where I tore the engine apart was pretty enjoyable because I've never seen inside that engine. There was no test run or anything like that. So we were all seeing it at the same time as I was filming it.
Yep.
So that was really fun. And it really feels like we have this goal in the beginning, like we have a car, and at the end, it's all going to be a part. And then you're kind of going through that step, and then it's a constant reveal. Like, you open the hood and there's the engine, and you pull out the engine and there's more parts, and you pull off the valve cover and there's a valve train, you pull off the head and then there's a piston. So there's continually all of these, I guess in filming they call them, whatever you call it. So I haven't done this for that long, but
it was like a treasure chest,
the reveal
right?
shot. It's called the reveal shot.
Yeah.
So, like there'll be something behind, here, and then there's the reveal. And Stephan is now in the picture. That's why I kind of walk into each one of the beginning, into the frame and the beginning of all my videos. It's like the reveal of me in the beginning. I don't know. I like that. But when you're tearing apart an engine, it's just this constant reveal of something new that you've never seen before.
Yeah.
So that was really fun to me.
No, that really works.
And then I had another question, especially about the paper drift video. How did that sort of come about?
The stop motion one.
Yeah.
So my buddy John Brewer works in Hollywood industry. He's a producer and aspiring director, and he's a filmmaker and all these different things. But his main job in Hollywood at the moment is production. So we've used him when we've had drifting events out in the canyons in Los Angeles Canyon, and what else did we do? When we did downtown LA and we drifted the 4th Street Bridge, he helped produce that. So, as this COVID stuff shut Hollywood down, he hit me up around March and he's like, "Hey man, we can't do any on location filming and we're pretty much all shut down." He's like, he's telling me how he loves stop motion. And it's usually so time consuming to do a stop motion. It's cost prohibitive. Like, it's so many days of editing, so many days of filming, so much of everything. They're just too expensive to do it. He's like, but he's like, I've got time right now. He's like, my buddy who's a director of photography has some great camera equipment and he's got some time too. Like, what if we came to your shop and wore masks and we'll be super safe there, and we'll shoot the stop motion video. And I was like, I love it. Let's do it.
How long did it take?
He filmed it for 4 days. He did a pre-production for probably a week or so, planning it out. Right. Filmed it for 4 days. They had a whole shot list and everything, very, very Hollywood style. Like, they knew what they were doing before they went into it.
Right.
He spent probably a week or so editing. We went back and forth with the edit. There's actually a couple versions. There's a 90-second version also where I'm washing my hands and doing all this other stuff. Mm-hmm. And then he sent it out to we had Lee Diffie, who does Formula One and NASCAR voiceovers, did the voiceover on it.
Yep.
And that was very nice of him to do that. And then John sent it out to a friend that did like the special color correction on it. And then a different professional that's a Emmy nominated sound creator who did the sound effects and everything for it. So it was it got the full Hollywood commercial treatment, you know, for a fun stop motion video with some drift cars in it. So that was something really special.
Well, something came out of this lockdown for you then.
Yeah, you know, it was a project that he's been wanting to do. We wanted to do something a little bit different. So yeah, and at the same time, we're like, what can we do? We can't go to tracks, we can't do anything. And so glad he called us on that. Yeah.
Hey, Stephan, this is Sam. Sorry, I was a little late. I was out no, I wasn't protesting. But hey, how many people actually worked on that thing, on that stop motion?
So it was John and his buddy Brian did all of the filming. So John did all of the car setups, Brian did the lighting, and then they had this really sophisticated camera. So it's all of the filming is done. Well, the stuff with me was filmed with like an Alexa cam, like a commercial grade Hollywood camera, like these $100,000 cameras they have. And then it's just a 5D Mark III or whatever, like a still camera shoots everything else. Right. And they have this I forgot what they call it, but it's like a motion thing where it moves along and a laptop controls it. So each shot, you know, if they do 24 per second, it moves a little bit each time they do a shot. So it looks like the camera is panning with the shot. Mm-hmm. So anyways, it was just two of them that did the filming here in the shop. The post-production was all done with everybody at home. So John did that in his house on his laptop, and then he sent it out to his buddy that did color, and that guy did it on his computer to his house, and they sent it out to audio, and he did it at his house. So it was really, John was really, because he's in production, he was like, look, man, we can produce stuff and not have to be on location or in a studio, even in a lockdown situation. He wanted to prove that they can do it, and they did.
I'm telling you, Stephan, this thing was so cool that I could see a little like a sequel or something, maybe with a paper Stephan Papadakis, you know, and maybe a little story behind it and a little short film. You know what I'm saying? I mean, this was cool. I know it would take a lot of money and, you know, time to make something like that, but I mean, it was really cool. So.
Thank you.
All right. Yeah. Well, I think we're almost out of time. Stephan, where can people find you? And if you want something to say to our audience.
Yeah. I guess thanks for watching. We really are passionate about building cars and sharing the behind the scenes. And if you want to see more, I post often on my Instagram. Steph Papadakis is the handle.
Which, as you can see, Stephan, I follow here.
Yeah,
just what I noticed. So I got that followed.
And then our YouTube, which is Papadakis Racing.
Check out his YouTube, yeah.
Which is also subscribed to, as you can see there, Stephan. I just try to be a good team player here. I don't know about Sam and Taro, but the others are definitely they're all there.
I'm a fan. I'm a big fan.
Yep, and thanks, guys. And then, in the next week or so, we're going to release the actual video of that Supra build testing on the track and how we go through the full day of, you know, the things never turned a tire on the track before, and the different stages we go through to making sure that it's, you know, the brakes work and then the wheels don't fall off, and then we start drifting a little bit, then we start drifting a lot. We've held off a little bit on that video because, you know, there's so much in the news and there's so much going on right now. Mm-hmm. But I think the plan is to release it next week if we get a moment, you know,
little break.
To do that, a little break.
Break in the news cycle.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, Nigel McKeon is very much looking forward to it, Stephan. That's one thing for sure.
Great.
Nigel is James' dad.
Oh, got it. Yeah. Thomas said hi. All right. Well, thanks, guys. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on board. Good luck. We're looking forward to seeing you out on the track again, Steph.
Thanks, guys. Okay. Bye.
Yeah.
Thanks. Bye.
So, Sam, I made sure I told everyone ahead of time where you were for this last hour. So don't be afraid. It's okay. They know exactly where you were.
Protesting? I wasn't protesting, though.
I just told them that you had a bad burrito, and that was the result, is that you couldn't leave the bathroom.
Okay, that'll work. But
he picked up a burrito that was thrown.
So why is Taro in the confines of deep space?
Can't you see? I'm supporting I'm supporting.
Oh, you're. Oh, is that what this is? Oh, okay.
This is
I
in
see.
support, Sam.
I see. I came too late to even do any background, so this is my office. So.
I just want to know what that 007 thing is over your head there, Sam. That's what
Oh,
I'm
that is
concerned
that's a Lotus Esprit diecast
Oh.
box. Yeah, from his. I think it was the one For Your Eyes Only. The copper one, that he took skiing. I don't know if you. I'm a big James Bond nut, so.
I'm well aware of it. I was wondering which one it was. Your hair is looking wonderful, though, Sam. I will say
in
that.
house finally.
Yeah, sorry.
Next, I think James has a review for us.